Hey, everybody, welcome back to Off the Wall. I'm Mike.
What's happening on Bogz?
We're back for another episode 4 of ANDOR, the new Star Wars series on Disney Plus. Last week we had a 3-episode burst, giving us a big, long pilot type introduction into the show. And now in episode 4, we're learning more about the world, learning more about the current state of the Empire as it stands. I think they said it's 5 years before the Battle of Yavin is where we're at. I think is what they said before. We get introduced finally to Mon Mothma. We learn more about Skarsgård's character, whose name I don't think we've actually even gotten yet in the show. I could be
His
wrong.
name's Luthen Rael.
Okay,
Rael,
something like that. So we've learned he's like his like facade lifestyle is he's like an art dealer of some kind, an antiquities dealer. We saw him, putting on his rings and his wig and practicing his like, hey, in the mirror before he got there. And we're introduced to what seems to be kind of the early seedlings of a rebel alliance of rebel cells, maybe something similar to what Saw Gerrera has, because we got his name dropped. When he drops off Cassian under another fake name, he's just racking up the aliases in this show. I know last week you were a little mixed on how you were feeling about the show, mixed to not loving it as much. How did you feel about this episode more?
It was exactly that. My previous thoughts on it were I was not looking forward to this episode massively. I was in terms of the world building and like the costumes and the planets and the set designs and that kind of thing. The world building around it, but story wise, no, not at all. However, I really enjoyed it. I feel like if you're, I feel maybe if you're a casual Star Wars fan, like if you watch The Mandalorian, let's say, you may thought just the show in general was really slow, but this episode too, because there's almost no action in this episode as well. But I was thoroughly engaged every single scene with all the Easter eggs, the callbacks, the lore building, the references, the story that they're telling now. I didn't like the major issue from the first two episodes was Andor's story and his backstory and and his kind of new, his adopted parents and why is he looking for his sister. They've almost paused that storyline completely. Didn't address any of it apart from maybe this the Luthen Skarsgård's characters. When they're on the ship, when he's got his injured hand, and when they go to Lightspeed and stuff, maybe see for a minute or two there. Except for that, they've completely paused that. To my relief, basically, because what was presented with Mon Mothma and the Imperials, I thought was all fantastic. Stellan Skarsgård, standout. Like his acting is amazing. Like it's actually amazing. Like when he tells the girl, like, "Be quiet," kind of thing, and I forgot what he said. He didn't say "be quiet." He said like "listen" or whatever. And then when he's doing,
shut up and listen to what I'm tell
exactly.
you.
And when he does the whole, getting into character thing, I thought it was amazing. He puts the wig on. He's just like, talking to himself as he did. I thought, wow, like the acting is super good. But I do like him and Andor's chemistry.
Yeah.
On the ship and everything, and how he kind of knows his backstory, but he's revealing it kind of slowly. Obviously, we don't know how he knows that or anything, but just his kind of way of this kind of part politician, part spy kind of thing, and trying to get obviously Andor on his side to recruit him into the early beginnings of the rebellion, and then seeing obviously Coruscant, in live action, which we haven't seen hardly at all since the prequels, and having a prequel character obviously in Mon Mothma, she's fantastic. The actress, because I think she was the first from the Disney era, the first prequel character or actor to appear in live action, I believe. But maybe
because she was in Revenge of the Sith, but all of her stuff was cut. There was a whole subplot with her and kind of the early ideas of what the rebellion was going to be. So yeah, she was cut from that, and then we saw her pop up again in Rogue One, and so she's kind of that only real through line we've had from the prequels, other than like Ewan McGregor,
Or
being
like, I mean, up until Rogue One came out, but
yeah,
obviously we had C-3PO, R2-D2,
right,
maybe Chewie here and there, because obviously he was in Revenge of the Sith and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of biggest one up until that point, and great to see her back. Seeing her husband,
yeah,
who gives her nothing but a headache by the looks of it. But even that was interesting because
yeah,
his dealings with his politicians. Do these guys know Palpatine? Or are they close to his circles in any way? And seeing the Imperials and what they are doing exactly, like they are kind of in charge of. Initially, they discussed they are like almost a committee to investigate any security breaches, that kind of thing. But the more they kind of discussed and went deeper into it, they are there to sniff out any potential terrorist towards or terror attacks towards that's the way I saw it anyway, towards the empire, and sniff out any kind of potential uh rebellion kind of routes and that kind of thing. And obviously a number of Game of Thrones actors appear in this. There was so many across the board, just British actors that you just recognize from television dramas, independent films, comedy, sitcoms and soaps and things like that. It was like what every almost new character who was British I kind of saw before. So pleasantly surprised to see all these, being uh, just adding a quality of, I guess, connected to espionage for the rebellion or for the empire, and adding layers to it as well. So yeah, lots to really really like. Still don't love the score, to be honest. It's very. I made a particular point of paying attention to it. It's really really low key and subtle. Clearly they're doing it on purpose, but I so wish it was not that way, to because it takes away the grandioso of it, if you will. And the score is a major character in Star Wars, if not the most important thing. And to have it so mellow is actually distracting for me. But yeah, so many, with the lore stuff, talking about so much previous history, even Stellan Skarsgård's room. There were so many artifacts I saw with the Twi'leks and Hera's kind of thing that she has in Rebels from her home planet, which Thrawn also uses to kind of, when he's like torturing her, kind of thing. I saw holocrons in there, all kind. I saw I forgot what race Jar Jar Binks is.
Gungan,
Yeah, Gungan. The shield that they have
yeah,
in Phantom Menace, all kinds of things there. So like the previous 3 episodes, almost literally no Easter eggs, callbacks, lore building, references, and this episode was just a bunch of stuff I have no clue about or can't wait to kind of dive into. I saw some comic book things that they mentioned, like character, the ancient beings that they worship and things like that. Definitely recognize them from the comic book. So going to touch up on that. So before the next episode, before they go on this before they go undercover and stuff, I will dive into that. But yeah, anyway, like so much to like about this episode. Even though there wasn't too much action, completely fine with it because every scene was interesting and engaging. I really enjoyed it.
yeah. What we got, I think, and it was kind of like what we were theorizing it last week when we talked about the first 3 episodes, was it felt like those were just there to set up where we're at in the world. It almost felt like the flashbacks were only there to just establish and Cassian's backstory, because we had none this episode, which makes me think they were just there for the first 3, again, on this like 3-part pilot that we got, to just establish who these people are and how kind of we got to here. We can come back to other stuff later as we go. Right now, it's just they're making the decision that's not important right now. There's no need to have it if we don't need it. The world building in this was next level. We're for the first time, we're really getting to see, outside of books from the old canon, how the Imperial government actually is working. Because you've got to figure, yeah, there's got to be people who are part of the Imperial government who are just there to deal with budget. They're going to have a guy whose job is just the budget, or, a quartermaster, that kind of thing. Like they're going to have people whose jobs are pretty mundane, but the empire still needs it. And we're getting to see how a lot of that is working, seeing the governmental structure of the empire and how it's also going to play in these other things. Because yeah, if he stole this piece of empire tech, they're going to want to know, like, how did that happen? We get to see how they're now kind of pulling the reins on these uh basically contractor security forces, who's like, all right, look, we trusted you guys to handle this, you screwed up, now we have to come in and clean up your mess. So you're lucky that we're still going to keep you on as basically peons, because he's basically telling them, like, you're going to come to Coruscant and you're going to work for us and you're going to push whatever mop we give you to push, because you got people killed and made us look dumb.
Hmm.
So seeing a lot of that. We had Denise Goff, who plays this. What is her name? She plays Dedra Miro.
Mhm.
So this security officer who's trying to figure out, kind of the same way the officer Cyril Karn was in the
Mhm.
first three, is like, I think they're going to wind up coming together. They both seem to have that kind of overzealous desire to do their job and further their careers. And I think they're going to come to a head and realize, like, they can both accomplish that goal for themselves and each other. And Andor is going to get caught up in the middle of it. And yeah, like, Skarsgård was by far the star of this episode. He was so good. Again, that scene of him in his ship, just like, okay, I gotta remember how to be. Oh, hey, it's
It was
such
great.
a
Mhm.
we're literally watching a spy get into character, and
Mhm.
we haven't really. This is just it's all this stuff in Star Wars that had to have been happening. We just haven't had it happen on screen yet. And so I loved it, and I can't wait, like you. I can't wait to see, like, new rock stars pick apart his shop for just
Mhm.
all there's because there was I think there was something in there that looked like something out of Force Unleashed. I got to go back and look at it again.
Mm.
But yeah, there's so much to see there.
Yeah, and all the all the law stuff was great. Even a lot of the dialogue that they're talking about, kind of ancient history,
Mhm.
and older cultures and things like that. So definitely things that I'm going to look into and do some research on. Um, but yeah, the Imperial characters were also good. The lower ranking ones, as you said, like not. So yeah, dealing with the kind of lower level Imperial, I guess they're managers, I guess, of
Yeah, it's
security
they're
forces
department
and
heads.
third
It's
parties. Yeah,
just
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I even find it interesting that they're trying to um, kind of steal their payroll almost to fund
Yeah.
uh, potentially fund the rebellion, because obviously Mon Mothma struggling to take funds from the Senate, if you will, and see how that mission goes. And yeah, and then going on to Mon Mothma, what she's saying. Well, in the next kind of episodes or whatever, seeing the Senate on Coruscant with all the different kind of parties involved. We haven't seen anything like that in such a long time. Will we see Palpatine or even a hologram Palpatine? And in that way, even with these boardrooms, where the kind of the scene, the Game of Thrones guy, where when he kind of when he's talking sorting the other two out who were bickering about um, the information and stuff, the just that room when they were obviously it's very A New Hope esque, well, very Star Wars esque, and I've got reminiscent like flashes of The Boys as well for some reason. With Homelander, the way he kind of dictates the
Yeah.
plan and things like that to
Yeah.
people. But yeah, will we see any other characters? Of course, Krennic, Tarkin, obviously a long shot, but potentially Vader,
I
Alien
hadn't
Ursa.
considered Krennic. I hadn't
Yeah, yeah.
thought
I
about
mean,
that. That's
I
yeah.
was waiting for him to turn up in that room, to be honest, because he seemed to be obviously he's a director, but like
Mm,
he seemed to be, and he's in charge of a huge facility and project and stuff. But
yeah.
um, I thought that, and obviously we've got a Scarif mention. I thought that he would be like a
Yes.
senior figure within that security forces, that kind of thing. So, yeah, all that was super interesting. Knowing more about the Empire, yes, at the lower levels, but it's still fascinating of how it works in terms of the bigger picture and post Order 66 and things like that, because obviously they even talked about Minban. Obviously, Minban we see in Solo, but we also know that there's been conflict there since the Clone Wars, which after Order 66, the Empire took it over, which is why it's a army or navy training base for the Empire, which is why Solo was there. So again, we know that Cassian was on there. And it's like a mud planet, so it's horrible conditions and stuff. So he's been kind of, he's been put through it basically. Andor's had a rough life, clearly. But yeah, there's so much I like about this, so deep. Obviously, I did complain last week about, no kind of Force mentions or discussions, but I do see sprinklings of it, not necessarily the Force, but they're talking about, these older or ancient beings and worshipping certain beings, and I'm pretty sure Mon Mothma's husband mentioned one of Palpatine's aides. I believe
There was
somewhere that they are Force sensitive.
there was a name that was mentioned, and I need to go back and watch it again. It's
Yeah,
a
I need to
name
watch
that
a
Mon
breakdown
Mothma
video.
mentions, and I was like, wait, that sounds really familiar. I got to go back and check it out again.
Yeah, and of course we saw the holocrons in
Yeah,
uh,
in the shop.
Stellan Skarsgård's room. Yeah. So much to like. So much more interesting than the first 3 episodes. Because I'm not in any rush whatsoever to watch them back. But this I could watch again, just for the Easter eggs alone.
Yeah,
And yeah, of course the acting was good. I like a lot of the new characters, even the small kind of extras, if you will. The dialogue was so much better this episode, though. The storyline throughout the episode, whether it's via the early fraction of the rebellion, the political stuff, or the Empire, I was in on it all. It was all really fascinating. Of course, looks gorgeous as well. The planets are amazing. Coruscant looks fantastic. Some of the CG a couple of times regarding ships and ships landing, that kind of stuff um, didn't look amazing. I'm not gonna lie, but I kind of forget that because I thought, on Coruscant with a lot of CG plane landing, like we've seen that before. So,
yeah,
or vehicles landing, whatever. So, and of course the speeder, and they were just throwing in these odd things. That's what I was looking for in the first 3 episodes, because that is the identity of Star Wars. And there were so many great Star Wars things, the boardrooms and all the callbacks and stuff. So I was a lot happier with this as a, definitely a original trilogy, a prequel fan. I could definitely appreciate this episode much more, and I'm 100% looking forward to it next week. And just the intrigue of who we might see. Obviously, we know Saul Guerrero is in this on the rebellion side, but on the Imperial side, I'm really hoping they're bringing Thrawn or Tarkin or Krennic, something along them lines. Seeing this Senate again. So yeah, it's really exciting. And again, no action this episode. So maybe next episode we're going to see their kind of plan of how, and even they mentioned that the Emperor, had these vaults and stuff. And obviously we've seen in other medias like in Battlefront 2, there's a story arc involving Luke where I think Polio or Pilo, I think the name of the planet is, where he finds a holocron there, and there's so many weapons there, and that the Emperor and it's like the Empire stored. It's like storage facility basically,
yeah.
which they are going to take over and stuff. So again, lots of callbacks and lore involving different material, which I really appreciated. But yeah, I really, really, really liked it.
And it's interesting because I guess I had not considered Krennic, and because we're only
Mm.
5 years removed from the events of Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. We get the name drop of Scarif. They mentioned that like they're sending lots of tech and supplies and stuff to there. But also in the first episode, they mentioned the planet Wabani. He's like talking about doing a Wabani run. That's the planet, that's the prison planet that Jyn Erso
Mm-hmm.
is on, where they get her from. So that's twice now we've had direct references to something to do with the events of Rogue One.
Right.
So I'll be curious to see, because there's been talk of whether or not they'll do another season of this show. I think a lot of that depends on how far forward in time we go, because obviously there's a limit. We can only go so far
Right.
before we're up against where Rogue One kicks in. So I'll be curious to see how much tying into Rogue One we're actually going to do, because between this and Marvel, Ben Mendelsohn is in the Disney family. They could easily bring him in to come shoot a couple scenes. You know, I don't, Tarkin would be interesting because the deep fake Tarkin we got in the movie wasn't super well received. People were kind of hit and miss with that. I think if you did it via like a communication hologram, it'd probably be a bit easier to swallow. But the Emperor, I think, is one we would almost have to see, because in A New Hope, we know that by the time A New Hope happens, because they mention it in their meeting, that they have dissolved the Senate altogether, that now it's all up to the governors are in charge
Mm.
of everything. There is no more imperial Senate. So I wonder if we're going to start to see, because we're following Mon Mothma and when her dealings within the Senate so much, it seems like, I wonder if we're going to start to see the Emperor coming in, making moves to dissolve the Senate. There's a lot, there's a big open window for what we can do now, given the time frame that we're playing in. So I'll be curious to see what they do with that.
Yeah, definitely. All the Senate stuff, you know, that is a major, I think, criticism of the prequels. I loved it in particularly episode one.
Mm.
Like as growing up, it literally made me more interested in politics. That
Yeah.
yeah, all that talk. So because obviously being, you know, a youngster and watching the movie over and over again and learning about, you know, senates, about politicians, about, you know, not telling the truth and being underhand and stuff. So um obviously, you know, all the important stuff about politics, but yeah, all that stuff is, it's all there, and it's super intriguing for me. And when, for me, Star Wars gets that right. It's, you know, the prequels particularly, and obviously the original trilogy. But yeah, I'm really invested in the Imperial Senate. Yeah, I'd love the meetings of, you know, of votes to, like, you know, kind of disband the Republic and stuff. Yeah, you're right, because obviously we see in Rogue One, not even at the point of A New Hope, but at Rogue One, there's clearly not a Senate. You know, there is just a rebellion or pockets of rebellion, or kind of teaming up to, you know, to finally kind of take on the Empire. But yeah, it's definitely a awesome thing that I'd love to see, and perhaps it happens in the, you know, in on Coruscant, where, you know, so much other dealings have happened, and again, we might get some other characters that we haven't seen in a long time, maybe since the prequel. So I'd love all that. Yeah, sounds great. Another theory I thought as well. Um, obviously, we mentioned a few. I mentioned a few characters about potentially, you know, Krennic and Tarkin, but again, I think maybe Thrawn, because
Yeah.
obviously this seems like a bit of a low level issue for these guys who are admirals and
Yeah.
you know, and directors of the empire. This issue seems, you know, this is low level security thing, which obviously blossoms into a full blown rebellion, which they don't deal with, of course,
Yeah.
until it gets too big for them to ignore. Um, but maybe, you know, we might get one or two or a few of them involved, maybe a few episodes down the line. But I would really, really love that, even if it is, like you said, a hologram, um, or something via that method. Yeah, I mean, it's anything like that. Like now, I'm excited. Now I'm excited because we can get all these other characters in. Um, and yeah, and you know, imagine seeing the Emperor and that kind of thing. I'd love all that.
Yeah. Thrawn's an interesting one, because we know that Ahsoka is going to have something to do with that, with her show when it pops in. Based on the timeline of where this falls with Rebels, it'll be interesting to see if he's around at that point still.
He's
Um,
building his career, isn't he?
yeah,
He has a reputation of
yeah,
being tactical, efficient, so smart, and he's built that as a admiral. Obviously,
yeah,
he has the label as admiral, but he's built that over a number of years. And this is that time, you know, of him building. So, what kind of things he done? You know, we haven't seen live action or in animation actually.
yeah,
We've only kind of seen it in books or that kind of thing. So, of course, he did have a relationship with Anakin. We did see in the Thrawn latest trilogy. So, and Padme for that matter, and Tarkin. So seeing that in live action, I mean, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And an unexpected angle like this show, I'd really like that.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they're going to do next. There's a lot of different ways we can take it, especially with Mon Mothma being kind of dealing with the Senate, and then you've got Skarsgård kind of dealing with on the people level, and then it's just we're seeing a lot of different levels to their governmental structure. So there's a lot of different ways we can go with this, but definitely I think
Saw Gerrera as well. Maybe he
yeah,
will
we
bring
haven't
the
even
action
seen him yet.
potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if I think they said Jimmy Smits is in this as well as Bail Organa, which would make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of what's going on in Rogue One, depends on how. So I don't know. It's a lot.
Maybe they used Obi-Wan. Maybe they used Obi-Wan because they did say, ask your friend. The Jedi. Maybe that she said it before. I know I'm stretching completely, but maybe that wasn't the first time she's asked him to call upon him. Who knows?
There's
But, that'd be hilarious.
A lot of directions this could go. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the show is as it's unfolded in this episode is I'm like, no, we could really kind of just do anything, and it wouldn't feel out of place.
I'm so glad the show went this way, as opposed to being the super slow paced kind of episodes and story about Andor. I'm glad it's telling a bigger scope because to be honest with you, there's more important things in this timeline, in this period, than Cassian's backstory for me. So this whole episode was about that. So I'm therefore, I therefore thought it was really good. So keep away from that stuff. I know they're going to go back to it, but keep away from that.
It's like they're using him as the vessel to tell the bigger story of the rebellion. And honestly, that kind of makes sense because of how long he's been in the fight. Like he's kind of been in it since he was that young. So it makes sense that he would kind of be our through line through this whole.
Totally get. That's why they're making the series. I absolutely understand that, but it was so slow. It was rough. Last week it was an absolute struggle for me, anyway. But I totally agree. They're telling there's beginnings of the rebellion via Andor and other characters, Mon Mothma, etc. But yes, I agree. But I've seen it now, so let's see the rebellion take on the Empire, or grow that way. That's more interesting to me, anyway.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens next week. We're definitely gonna hunker down and see what happens and see where we get to next week. We've still got a lot more story to tell. We've got another 8 more episodes, so not in a rush. Let's just tell the story that we're going to tell. We're here for it. Hopefully you guys are too. Make sure you let us know down in the comments. Let us know on Twitter. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you guys again next time for another episode of Off the Wall. Bye.